tell you what,
It's not like the olden days.
I'm Rosie,
I'm Jake.
and we're going to talk to you today about Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which has had a few incarnations actually, but mostly we'll be talking about the live-action TV series starring Melissa Joan Hart, which started in 1996, if I'm not mistaken, and it was mostly a Melissa Joan Hart vehicle, wasn't it? She had been, as you may remember, starring in Clarissa Explains It All, which was quite good. I think we used to watch it, and it was about being a teenager in the modern world and having a family and going to school and that kind of stuff. And she did that from when she was about 14 up until she was about 17, and they started trying to have a spin-off continuation sort of thing when she was 18, but that didn't work out. So then she did Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and I don't know if you remember when she was speaking to Malcolm Jeffries and the Goggles via satellite link. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do, vaguely.
It was when they kept having that fictional family called the Goggles on CITV. I can't really remember why. They started as some sort of however many years of CITV celebration and then got to do a few more things, but I don't suppose it really matters. But anyway, they would talk about existing CITV shows and upcoming CITV shows, and Malcolm Jeffries was this presenter who would be with them. And I remember Malcolm Jeffries telling Gary Goggle, the boy, that they were going to speak to Melissa Joan Hart. And I remember he said, "She's on the other side. I never watched The Other Side," because of course Clarissa was on BBC. And then Malcolm Jeffries explained that she was in a new show, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which was going to be on CITV, and then they had this conversation by satellite link. I can't really remember what they said, and I thought, oh, that sounds like the sort of thing I might like. Maybe I'll watch that. And it actually took me till the third episode to remember that I wanted to give it a go, and then for some reason I didn't see the fourth episode either the first time around, and from the fifth episode I started watching it religiously, and I know this because I've got it on DVD now, and I remember which episodes I saw. And what we're going to do is talk you through it, series by series, and tell you about all the characters and things that were going on in the show and whether they were much good. Sabrina was adapted for TV once before by Hanna-Barbera in the 1970s, and before that she was a character. So some of her contemporaries who appeared in Archie comics and the Hanna-Barbera cartoon has them looking pretty much like they did in the comics, but Hanna-Barberified to various degrees. Harvey, her love interest, looks a lot like Officer Dibble and has a ridiculous voice, but we'll find out all about how you should really do Harvey shortly. And I did watch an episode on YouTube, and it was a bit boring, but not too boring like many Hanna-Barbera cartoons were. But what I thought was quite interesting was that Sabrina's Aunt Hilda was a sort of wicked witch who was trying to get Sabrina to be evil and do things to her friends, like turn them into animals and stuff, which is very different from anything else I've seen. But that's about the only interesting thing. So now let's talk about TV show. As I've said, it starred Melissa Joan Hart, and I think she's very good.
They did start with a pilot movie earlier in 1996, and Melissa Joan Hart was moved to the TV show from that, and they realised that all the rest of the cast in that TV first pilot movie were not right for it at all. They're all different in the TV show, except Sabrina's friend in the first series, who's come over from the pilot. So she only lasts one series on the real show. She has a new name on the real show. They obviously thought she and Melissa Joan Hart made good on-screen friends anyway. But I remember thinking when seeing that initial TV pilot movie this isn't really working, and Harvey's absolutely flat, and the aunts aren't right, and it's not just because it's different from the TV show, it's that it's wrong, flat, lifeless.
Yeah, it's very true. The bitchy girl character was very generic, which is a term I like when you want to say someone's very much like everything else of its type. Harvey, as you say, was flat as a pancake. The two aunts, Hilda and Zelda, might have just as well swapped names and it wouldn't have made a difference, and possibly at one point they even did. Certainly at one point I was thinking, oh, maybe she's Hilda, the more inclined to break the rules. And then they switched, and I thought, oh, maybe it's supposed to be the other one. So that was no good. There's also Salem the cat, whose voice was completely forgettable. I do remember him explaining to Sabrina how he used to be a person, but he became a cat because he cast a love spell, which is a bit different in the TV series. And I can't really remember much about Michel Baudouin, or however you pronounce it. It's spelled Beaudouin, so in French that would be Baudouin, but I'm sure it's got an Americanized pronunciation. I can't remember much of what she actually did in it, but I can tell you all about her in the TV series. So, yes, it didn't really work, but obviously someone realised Melissa Joan Hart and a cat and the same basic characters but better could work, and it did. Certainly for the first series there's not much wrong with it, I don't think. I like it a lot. Thereafter every series has its problems, which I'll tell you all about. But Melissa Joan Hart is very engaging, very funny. Some people like to say she can't act. Certainly her acting that I've seen isn't the sort that you get in Brokeback Mountain and serious things like that, but I do think it suits the characters that she plays and the style of comedy that they're doing, and I like her a lot.
She's one of these people who's a very talented comedy actor and plays to her strengths by doing comedy. We mention them sometimes. Wayne Knight, Victor Maguire, Melissa Joan Hart, I think, fits into that category. And why not? It's good to be a skilled comedy actor. You don't necessarily have to do all serious stuff to be a good actor, an appreciated actor.
Absolutely. So the premise of the show, anyway, is that Sabrina finds out on her 16th birthday, Melissa was in her 19th year when they started, but never mind, that she is a witch. She's actually half witch, half mortal, which solves the problem of if you want child characters to be a witch. They've known they're a witch all along, and some of them live in the other realm, probably all of them, in fact. So anything to do with surprise and things not quite being the same as normal witches, well, it's because she's half mortal, that's alright. And her father is the witch, so that all her witch family can be called Spellman. They decided not to use the term warlock, which was in the comics and was in Bewitched, the 1960s housewife sitcom sort of thing that has many similarities to Sabrina. But I'm fine with that. I don't see any reason to differentiate by gender. She has to live with her aunts, Hilda and Zelda, because she's not allowed to see her mother for 2 years, or the mother will turn into a ball of wax, which is a way of discouraging mortal and witch marriages, they tell us. Really, it's just so that she can live with Hilda and Zelda without any awkward questions coming up. And they will teach her how to use her powers and give her advice and that kind of thing. Hilda is played by Caroline Rhea, who's mostly a stand-up comedian, isn't she?
Yeah.
I've seen some of her stand-up comedy, and it's very much standard fare, I think, for those American stand-up comedians. She is funny in the show. They give her comedy lines, and she says them very well. And her character is that she's the sort of fun aunt who will sometimes encourage Sabrina to use her magic frivolously or to get revenge and that kind of thing. And then the other aunt, played by Beth Broderick, is Zelda, who is a bit more serious and tries to encourage Sabrina to use her magic sensibly. And she could be a right old stick in the mud and not a very good character at all, really, which very occasionally she is if the wrong writers get hold of it. But overall, she gives very good advice and doesn't stifle Sabrina, as it would be very easy to have her do, and helps her to sort things out and get the best out of it, really. So that's very well done by the writers and the actress there. And the fourth character living in the house is Salem the cat. And it might interest you to know that when I watched this Hanna-Barbera cartoon, Salem was not a black cat, which is a bit different for sort of children's witch media stuff. Although, of course, in the olden days, any cat could be a witch familiar quite reasonably. And he doesn't talk, and I didn't get the impression that he ever was a person, so I think it's just an ordinary cat around the house that they use for a familiar.
I don't see the point of that. I don't see that he really adds anything to the show.
Well, I think he's just an accessory, really, isn't he? And I suppose sometimes Sabrina was saying things to him when she wanted the audience to know what she was thinking, but I think sometimes they would just talk out loud as well, so you don't exactly need him in that respect. But anyway, in this TV movie thing, they tried having a talking cat, which had also been attempted in that film Hocus Pocus, hadn't it? Which I used to like, and then I saw it recently and I thought it was incredibly boring. But a talking black cat does work, and Salem is voiced by Nick Bakay, and he's excellent. He's very funny, makes a lot of the lines that he's given, even when he's given not very much to do, as he sometimes is in season 1. And he is an example of a breakout character, I think it's fair to say, and ends up doing a lot more in subsequent series. And he's not a cat because he cast a love spell like in the TV movie. A bit more interestingly, you might say, and certainly more can come out of this in terms of the character and things that he can do. It's because he tried to use his magic to take over the world. And it comes up again that if you do anything like that, use your magic to commit crimes, you get turned into a witch familiar. And that's a fairly consistent rule in the Sabrina-verse, and there aren't many of those, I can tell you.
This was something I came to realise when you were last watching the DVDs, and you were telling me about a lot of the inconsistencies about the rules of the universe. And I thought, oh yes, that's probably one reason why I never found it really very easy to engage with as a fantasy world. It doesn't have its consistent, ongoing rules. And one week they'll say when a witch does this, when a witch feels that, this happens, that happens, and you never see anything or hear anything about it again, like on EastEnders when they get a marriage license for the Vic and stuff like that. And it doesn't make an immersive fantasy world that I would enjoy engaging with. Quite an important realisation, that, I think. I wasn't sure exactly why I didn't like it that much, but I think that's a big reason.
I think a lot of the reason season 1 is so much the best is they don't really do that. They don't have arbitrary rules. She just uses her magic and something happens and they have to sort it out. And it's not because if a witch does this and a witch thinks that, as you were saying. The one thing possibly is that the first time a witch kisses her mortal boyfriend, he turns into a frog. I actually do quite like that episode, because she's half mortal, there's only a 50% chance Harvey will turn into a frog, and then he does, and then they have to sort it out. But then I suppose that gets around why none of the other Josh, Kevin, Aaron, 3 mortal men that she kisses don't turn into frogs. But actually, they've just forgotten all about it. And also, there are other mortal witch relationships. Sabrina's parents, guest characters who I can't really remember at the moment, sometimes get into those sorts of situations. no one seems to worry that the mortal has been or will be turned into a frog. So, there you go. That's a pretty good example, actually.
And they could get away with that one off the first series, couldn't they? But then they build up more and more as the show progresses, and you can't help but notice that there's no consistency with the fantasy world.
A very annoying thing is when Sabrina gets side effects of things that are happening anyway. If a witch gets jealous, she gets gelatosis. If she starts getting too much stuff from her credit card, she gets getitis. If she's got two mortals in love with her, her heart turns into Valentine's candy. I mean, that's just silly. That's mostly season 4. There's a bit of that in season 3 as well, I think. But yes, that does get very annoying. But anyway, let's talk some more about season 1, which I think is really, really good. And let's talk about the rest of the cast, first of all. There's home and there's school. And I've talked about Harvey a few times. He is, as far as I can tell, the one contemporary of Sabrina's who is in everything, including the comics. And in fact, I don't think the others are in the comic from what I've read, but I didn't spend too long on that. But that's because he's her love interest. And he is played by Nate Richert, who was 18 when they started the show, and very, very cute. Cute as a button he was, and absolutely hilarious comedy actor. He can take anything, the simplest thing, and make it really funny. Like, he can lie in bed with his eyes open because Sabrina's been giving him espresso, and it's really, really funny. The way that he delivers his lines, it's sort of quite deadpan, isn't it? Hilarious, no matter what he says. He can be a flamboyant comedy chef in a fantasy musical sequence, and actually, he has very good chemistry with Melissa Joan Hart, and their comedy goes very well together.
I like it when he's pregnant and he goes, "My breasts are tender," in his deadpan way. I must have enjoyed that a lot because it's one of the bits I remember.
Yes, the episode as a whole isn't that good. It's the rumour mill, where you start a rumour in the rumour mill in the other realm, which I'll tell you about, and it comes true if it's a rumour about the mortal realm. And you think, well, okay, fine. But then, a bit later, you find out a rumour's come true in the other realm, and that's not consistent with what they said. So there's another example of that sort of thing. I'll tell you a bit later about when Nate Richert goes and comes back again. In the meantime, Michelle Bédouin, or however you pronounce her name, who played Marnie the friend in the TV movie, now plays Jenny the friend. As you said, she only lasts for one series. I didn't miss her after she'd gone. I didn't mind her when she was there. She's someone who likes to try and bring down the injustice within the school and be class president and that kind of thing, and looks upon the attempts of the cheerleaders to bully her with contempt and that kind of thing, and she does it fine, and I can't think of anything else to say about her, really. Then, of course, there's Libby, played by Jenna Lee Green, who is in it for 3 series, and arguably should have stayed a lot longer, because she's very, very good. And what she does is be a bitch. She is a cheerleader, she picks on Sabrina, sometimes Sabrina tries to use her magic to sort Libby out, and things go wrong. She's been turned into a pineapple, and a goat, and a zebra, and she does things like try to get off with Harvey at his Halloween party, not help the old folks charity buddy system thing, so Sabrina turns into her to get it some recognition and then starts sabotaging it or using it to her own ends, and that kind of thing. And in many ways, Libby is one-dimensional. You know, she is a bitch and that's all she is, and occasionally you get glimpses that she could do some other things as well, but not very often, which I guess is why they decided to get rid of her after season 3.
I remember the first episode I watched is the season 1 episode where Hilda and Zelda make themselves into teenagers so they can go with Sabrina and Harvey and Libby and Gordy to see this rock concert sort of thing. And I managed to get the idea of it. I didn't see the bit where the aunts were older, but I thought, oh yes, these characters are usually her guardians and they've turned into teenagers for this bit. So it must have been coming across pretty well as they were trying to tell the story. But I was interested in Libby in that episode because, as I was saying to Rosie after she'd watched it this time and I'd heard some of it through the wall, Libby in that one to me seems like a real person with real feelings. Unlike most episodes where she's this one-dimensional cheerleader bitch character. I remember watching the bit where she gets invited back to the hotel by the band who Sabrina has bewitched to make them want to take Libby back to the hotel. As will happen in these episodes, not to have sex, but just to hang out, you know. And I was thinking to myself, when I first started to watch this, oh, is this sort of rival, bitchy girl character going to turn around and say to Sabrina, well, I don't want you to come, because you're not my friend. And Libby turns around to Sabrina and says, I'm cool with you and the boys coming along, but your two friends, who are actually her aunts, don't like them. And I thought, oh, well, here we see a bit more to Libby, you know, she's not just a bitch to Sabrina for the sake of it. Obviously, the character has depth and some potential. And as Rosie was watching her way through the first 3 series recently and telling me some of the things they were doing with Libby, I was saying it's a shame that they don't develop her into a proper character with character development and make her more of a protagonist and a friend of Sabrina as the series goes on. And that happens in real life. Some school rivals and enemies become friends as you realise no real reason not to be friends. And that would have been a good thing to do with the show, I think. Give it consistency and character development. And I think deciding after season 3, oh, Libby's the one-dimensional character, we don't need her, abandon her, do other things, is a bit of a shame. Because she does do very well with what she's given. And I think I would enjoy and engage with some of the later seasons more if we saw Libby with her character development, still having a role in Sabrina's world, and indeed perhaps some of the other characters from school, Gordy or Valerie, who hasn't been mentioned yet because she starts in season 2, rather than just Harvey. And as you'll hear soon, they even think they can do it without Harvey at one point, which is an absolute disgrace. So again, a consistent world, not about magical rules this time, but about the characters and character development. I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see Libby developed and fleshed out as a character, rather than tossed aside when her initial use had run dry.
Yes, of course, another season 1 episode where she gets some character development is where she learns a lesson from being turned into a geek, isn't it? And by the way, Hey Arnold completely ripped off that episode, and another one where you win a trophy by cheating and it calls you a cheater, so you have to sort things out.
And they ripped off Teacher Strike from The Simpsons.
What a bunch of plagiarists. And there are a couple of attempts to do something a bit more with Libby in season 2, but unfortunately it's one of the worst writers. I'm going to tell you about him when we get on to season 2. And perhaps before, because he did write a very good season 1 episode. Before we do move on to season 2, we must mention Paul Feig as Mr. Poole. He's not very good, is he?
And as we know, he's now a director. He directed 2016 Ghostbusters, so maybe he's really a director rather than an actor. And if Nate Richert is one of these people who you give him a line and he makes it hilarious, Mr. Poole takes lines that could obviously be funny or slightly amusing, and says them in a way that makes them absolutely lose all impact they could possibly have. And I was thinking when I heard some of Mr. Poole's lines through Rosie's bedroom wall, oh, that would be funny if Mr. Kraft was saying it. I can see exactly why they, in effect, replaced Mr. Poole and Mr. Kraft.
Yes, Really, they replaced him with Mr. Kraft and Mrs. Quick, didn't they? Because Mr. Poole is neither a protagonist nor an antagonist, which is possibly a bit of an issue with him, but mostly it's because Paul Feig isn't much good.
Like Scarkill from Nightmare, he gets split into two separate characters in another series.
And we don't like the look of his films, do we? New Ghostbusters and that kind of thing.
And Dan Aykroyd was slagging him off about how he produced the new Ghostbusters and blaming him for all its shortcomings. So it's not just us.
Yes, you did make me laugh, didn't you, when you said that you found an interview with Dan Aykroyd and he'd been saying, Mr. Poole can be so annoying.
Oh yes, just like Sabrina.
One of her 3 phrases that her copiers allowed, which was the second episode I saw, that Halloween one. That is so true. I love to. Mr. Poole can be so annoying. Very good idea, that. One that she would, in real life, use again, make a copy and give it 3 phrases, but never does.
If there was universe consistency, she'd definitely do that again. Particularly, I was thinking in the one where she's finding she can't divide her time between her friends. This is in, like, season 6, isn't it? So she should make a copy to go to Harvey's football game and a copy to go shopping with Roxy or whatever it was, and do the other thing herself. Perfect solution, but she doesn't think of it because there's no universe consistency.
Yes, and in that one, Libby gets the copy to streak at the party by saying, someone should streak, and then the copy goes, I'd love to. So then that happens. And then Sabrina turns up and says, oh, I didn't streak, it must have been Libby. And Libby comes back in and they're all going, oh, it was you. And someone says, we saw your butt. And that was the one that made me think, oh, yes, I must watch this every week. Even though I missed last week, even though I quite enjoyed the one the week before. Because that's very fun. And the other thing that's going on, the reason Sabrina needs the copy is that she herself has to go to the Halloween celebration in the other realm with her aunts and see the extended family. And I like that, the other realm. You go in there via the linen closet in their house and you can have pretty much whatever the writer needs, and it doesn't seem forced because it's the other realm. You can do anything.
That's the thing, isn't it? You could keep on introducing new things, even changing little bits and pieces with the other realm, and it wouldn't interfere with the fantasy world in the mortal realm, in our world, which would stick to its consistent rules, and thus you would have an overall consistent universe.
Yes, exactly. In season 1, what can you do in there? You go there to take the test of true love to get Harvey changed back from a frog. You can get transportation to Mars for your skiing holiday.
Copying a Grand Day Out with Wallace and Gromit there, except that was the moon.
And of course, if you know anything about Sabrina, you ought to know that her third aunt, Vesta, lives there in the Pleasure Dome. And there's a whole episode about shall she go and live with Vesta in the Pleasure Dome, and Vesta's played by Raquel Welch. She's very famous and very funny.
She was once a sex symbol to the whole world.
And that's a very good episode, actually, and unfortunately, they can't get Raquel Welch, or they don't want to, or they don't try to come and be Vesta another time, but they do talk about her from time to time. But anyway, back to this Halloween party in the other realm. That is the introduction of Cousin Marigold, which is one of the witches whose name doesn't end in A, which is slightly annoying because in Bewitched as well, and in Sabrina, they nearly all end in A, and if the writer remembers the name ends in A, this doesn't apply to men, just women, because there are so many girls' names ending in A. And her daughter is Sabrina's cousin Amanda, which does end in A. So, call me pedantic, but it's just a bit annoying. And then Marigold has one other appearance as a different actress in season 3, but Emily Hart, Melissa Joan Hart's sister, she's a full sister, not one of the halves, appears once in every series except season 7 when she appears twice. And so I'll talk about her some more later, but she's only the character and the actress 9, I think, in her first appearance, and she's being a brat, and Sabrina has to sit at the kiddie table with her, and she puts Sabrina in a jar using her magic and that kind of thing. So from birth, full witches know they're witches and are using their magic, but that's okay.
She's almost exactly 10 years younger than Melissa, isn't she,
That's
Emily?
right.
And so that might make you suspect, she's probably one of the half-siblings. But no, that's not the case.
There are a couple of tiny ones. One plays Amanda's sister, who she never has before or since in season 3, Allie. And there's also a very small one who turns up in season 7, being Sabrina's flower girl. We'll talk about the whole marriage thing. And they're her half-sisters, and they're even younger than Emily. So obviously she has a very prolific father. I think I read on Wikipedia that he's got about 8 daughters and 1 son. But anyway, I reckon it's time to move on to season 2, which is where, in the credits, it stops saying just Nick Bakay, but Nick Bakay as the voice of Salem. They've realised he's really good. He needs some more recognition.
I always liked how Salem was obviously a person, a witch, frustrated at being stuck in the body of a cat, but he was also a cat. Like, he likes to play with the yarn, and he's eating all the meat on Thanksgiving and feeling sick, and one of them goes to him, so stop eating, and he goes, I can't. We've all seen cats in that state, haven't we?
Yes, very good. It's initially the writers, of course, doing that with the character, and then he makes so much of it. So then I'm thinking about the cast changes first of all. The credits go Melissa Joan Hart, Caroline Rhea, Beth Broderick, Nate Richard, and then instead of Michelle Bédon, it's Lindsay Sloane. Jenna Lee Green may have come up before her, having the longevity. Paul Feig is gone. It's Nick Bakay as the voice of Salem and Martin Mull as Willard Kraft, as they say in America. Now, I was saying there was nothing really wrong with Jenny. Well, this is what I meant anyway, but she wasn't brilliant either. And in fact, we have heard, haven't we, that part of the decision to swap her for Lindsay Sloane as Valerie was that Lindsay Sloane looked Jewish, and they'd been criticised for not being ethnically diverse.
I was flummoxed when I read that. They introduced her for ethnic diversity. I thought, really? Oh, she's meant to be Jewish. But then the character's not Jewish, is she? She has church.
Yes, that's right. I mean, she's as white as I am.
Which is very white, you may not be able to tell.
Yes, and yeah, she does have church. I was expecting her to have Christmas, but it wasn't Christmas, it was some sort of church fundraiser. So there you go. And who I've missed out, of course, is Alimi Ballard as the Quizmaster.
Who should have been missed out altogether from the show.
We will talk about him some more. Since we're on the subject, I wouldn't have pointed it out otherwise, but since we're on the subject, yes, he does help them to be more ethnically diverse. So that was what they did in order to be so. We'll talk about Valerie first. Lindsay Sloane is, I think, probably more engaging than Michelle Bédon. The character of Valerie is more like friend characters you've seen in other things, as told by Ginger springs to mind. She desperately wants to be popular and doesn't shrug off being picked on by the cheerleaders and is very, very insecure. There's an episode where Sabrina's, as they say, dream dropping. She's working as a sandman and eavesdropping on everyone's dreams, and Valerie's having this anxiety dream where she goes to school and finds out there's a test and she hasn't studied, and then all her clothes have gone, but it's very tastefully shot, of course. So you get the idea from that, what she's like, and Lindsay Sloane does it very well, and well enough to be continued into season 3, but then they have a bit of what they probably think is a shake-up after that, some unwise changes, in my opinion. So, just the 2 seasons for her. I mentioned Mrs. Quick, who's one of the replacements for Mr. Poole. She's not in the main cast. She's credited at the end, if she's in it, Mary Gross as Mrs. Quick. And she's a nice, in many ways, ineffectual, sort of quite timid teacher. She teaches maths. Mr. Poole taught science, by the way, who is sometimes bullied by Mr. Kraft, sometimes gets caught up in a spell and is a bit out of her depth. and brings a bit of fun and a different dimension to the school stuff. And then there's Martin Mull as Willard Craft, and he is very, very, very funny. He's the vice principal most of the time, season 2 and season 3, and season 4 he becomes principal, and he is a pretty much pure antagonist who gets to be the victim of some of Sabrina's spells when he's doing things like giving attention too much and being too uptight as a teacher. And one that does spring to mind that is very, very funny is when she makes him mentally younger. She's trying to get him to understand her generation and not be such a stick in the mud at school. And I don't happen to mind this one if you put the drug, it's candy, I think. It comes in the form of candy, this one, into a substance with caffeine. Then the container absorbs the spell, the potion, and it keeps on working every time he has some more iced tea, as it is. It's a bit arbitrary, but I don't mind that. There are worse ones than that. So he keeps getting younger and younger and younger, and he finishes up in a restaurant on a date with Hilda, and she doesn't realise at first that he's under this spell, so he's in this restaurant going, I'm bored, and that kind of stuff, which is very, very funny. Because, of course, he's after Hilda and goes on a few dates with her in season 2, and in season 3, Zelda decides she likes Mr. Craft and has a relationship with him. So there's a couple of different things to do with him there, school things and home things. And probably the only thing left to say about season 2 is Alimi Ballard and why he's there and why that's wrong. Their main writer, who was the creator of the show, Nell Scoville, is gone for season 2. And it seems that Frank Conniff, who wrote that very good season 1 episode about Salem being in a cat show, gets to be the chief. And he wrote the first episode of season 2, which begins with Zelda coming in and finding Sabrina having breakfast, and possibly there's a little bit of preamble, but basically it's when a witch turns 17, she studies for her witch's license, which makes no sense at all. There's never been any mention of witch's license. Sabrina can already do all the magic she wants, and when she gets her witch's license, nothing really changes, so there you go.
The very definition of arbitrary.
By the way, Frank Conniff also wrote the Christmas episode in season 1, and he writes the Christmas episodes for 2, 3, and 4, and none of them are any good either. He is a lazy writer, which this witch's license quizmaster business is a symptom of.
Salem is the guardian of the jealous sea just because he's there and the jealous sea is there. That's very lazy. Another example.
Oh, yeah. He remembers Christmas when Sabrina erases Christmas from existence because it doesn't work on witch familiars, and things like that. So the Quizmaster comes and tests Sabrina periodically, not usually in ones that haven't been written by Frank Conniff. There are 2 episodes, in fact, which haven't been written by Frank Conniff, where he turns up and tells her to do what she was going to do anyway. So a bit of a late addition there.
Rather like there are some episodes of The Incredible Hulk where you can tell that Jack McGee has been inserted at a late stage because the plot and characterization and flow of the episode would still work without it.
Frank Conniff also has a couple of friends. I can't happen to remember their names at the moment, so only he is getting named and shamed, but they do the same sort of thing. And as well as testing Sabrina, he will sometimes just turn up and give her arbitrary rules for that episode. The one that we all remember, I think, being only incantations this week. You don't remember that. You were terribly cross about it when we watched it when I got the DVD.
Again, I could see why I would be. The very definition of arbitrary there.
But then the funny thing is that writers start just using incantations for her spells when they want to just quickly and easily let the audience know what she's doing. Right the way through to the end of the series, 50% of the time, she'll point and something will happen, and if it's not obvious what's going on, she will make up a little incantation. There's really no need for that, so that's quite annoying. annoying. What else? You have to make a potion to turn people or yourself, whoever drinks it, into animals, even though she's turned herself into a cat, she's turned Libby into a goat, probably a few other ones, just in case she can't and she's in a situation where she needs to be an animal, she has to make this potion. And they're at Disney World at the time, getting a lot of money in exchange for having the facilities and attractions on the screen. So there you are. That's the point of the Quizmaster. Very, very annoying. And what about the actor himself? I don't think what they give him to work with is much good. It's the kind of comedy that it turns out from watching Snakes on a Plane only Keenan could do. But then would Keenan or someone better have made more of it? Maybe they would. It's very hard to tell. But if you want to sum up the Quizmaster in 4 words, he's afraid of clowns as unfunny characters scraping the barrel for a joke often are. In that season, Sabrina's looking after Amanda and gets turned into a doll and put in Amanda's toy box, so that's Amanda's appearance for that season, very much the same sort of thing as in her first appearance. And season 3 then is very, very similar to season 2, identical cast, except Alimi Ballard is gone, thank heavens. The arbitrary thing then running through that series is that Sabrina has to solve the family secret in order to be able to use her witch's license. But then after she's got her witch's license, what does she even use it for? Nothing. So that's annoying. And what happens is that some pretty good episodes happen, actually, and in most of them, a member of the very extended Spellman family is there and gives her a clue, which is a thing that they stick on this sort of board thing, and it ends up being like a word puzzle. So let's see if I can remember how it goes. Aviary, every, M plus ember, member.
Fire.
Yes, that's one of your favourite bits, isn't it?
It is fire, not ember.
Yes, she's trying to get Mrs. Quick to help her solve the secret because she's found out she likes brain teasers, so there's a use for Mrs. Quick. Aviary ember, heart minus L, heart means love, love minus L, of. Aviary ember, of, then I think things like the are there, and then Spellman, who's the superhero with ABC on it, and then Fay Ray, a picture of Sabrina, i.e. a picture of me, as she calls it, and Robert E. Lee, Fay Me Lee. Then, she doesn't actually solve this one on screen, Snake minus S is, and we figured out that must be hiss, didn't we?
Is it actually a picture of the character from the Robin Hood Disney film?
I don't think it is, no, it's a green one.
Shame.
So, Avery Ember of the Spellman family is horn minus H plus B, or is it just plus B? Born with whip. That doesn't have a plus or a minus letter, and she doesn't solve this one on screen either. So, she must just work out off screen. Whip means with a ball of string minus E, and it's actually twine.
Twin becomes twine with me, as she should remember from Look and Read.
Yes, she has to get Salem to tell her it's twine, not string. I suppose that's not an important detail, is it? So yes, Avery Ember of the Spellman family is the horn whip with a twin. Every member of the Spellman family is born with a twin.
But it's not in the sense that they're born from the mother at the same time, which confused me for years. A twin comes into existence or is born from another mother elsewhere for every member of the Spellman family. Or does it pop into existence in the other realm?
Well, it means doppelganger, doesn't it? And Sabrina's twin doppelganger, Katrina, has a history and lives in an identical house and everything, and I think she lives in the mortal realm. But if you look up evil twin on TV tropes, it will tell you that 70% of the time, an evil twin is an evil doppelganger rather than a twin in the fraternal sense.
Yes, indeed. Earthworm Jim, Wally from Where's Wally or Where's Waldo, for example, have those.
That's why his evil twin is called Oddlaw, Waldo backwards. So that's okay, and that was the first time anyone's mentioned evil, of course. It was Witch has a twin, one of them is evil. And then the season finale is finding out whether Sabrina or Katrina is evil, and after a lot of faffing about and some doubt, it turns out Katrina is the evil one. And then, Sabrina can use her witch's license, and then you never hear about it again. So, that was that. An interesting thing about Amanda's appearance in season 3 is that it's a backdoor pilot, as I never noticed and Jake found out reading something about it, where Amanda, this little sister Allie, and their mother Marigold don't have their magic anymore and are married to, living with, they're not all married to, the plumber and his 3 rowdy sons, which sounds like you couldn't really do that much with it, and it didn't get picked up, unsurprisingly. But that's one of the rules that they could have and should have established. Are you allowed to tell mortals that you're a witch? If you aren't, do you lose your magic? You are allowed to tell them, but you probably shouldn't because it won't go down well. We've had, you are not allowed to tell them because if you do, you will lose your magic. And we've had, you are not allowed to tell them, and if they tell somebody else, you will lose your magic, which is what actually happens to Marigold, Amanda, and Allie.
Horrible inconsistency. And I always used to think Sabrina should tell Harvey for the sake of their relationship. So in my version of the world, it's going to be fine to share it with someone very close to you, as indeed it should be, I think.
There's an episode where you're allowed to tell a mortal on one day, and then the next day they forget, and anyone they tell forgets. And Sabrina's saying, I can tell everyone, and then, I can tell Harvey, it won't matter if he forgets the next day. And Zelda and Hilda saying to her, but you remember, and the way that they react might make you feel differently about them, which I think was quite good, really. It's just a shame it comes out of this terribly inconsistent rule. And there's another one where Sabrina's voting in the Other Realm election for someone who wants to introduce a rule that you are allowed to tell your mortal boyfriend. If they started with the rule that you are not allowed to tell them, and if you tell them you lose your magic, that would have been okay. Mind you, I was saying earlier, you can have anything in the Other Realm and it's fine. But it's not always fine if they make it too stupid. There are actually 2 completely ridiculous Other Realm equivalents to jury duty and Other Realm jury duty. So, one of them is dressing up like Death and telling Adrian Neal, who was a nightmare, that he's going to get athlete's foot for delivering bad news. And the other one, which is the first episode of season 6, which I'm going to slag off, is that you go to the Other Realm and you teach children how to be scary. I mean, how stupid is that? But another thing, actually, about this writer, Frank Conniff, and other writers do it too. There's a very lazy way of structuring an episode where Sabrina's doing whatever she's doing, and there's a rather pointless subplot involving Hilda and Zelda, and usually Salem as well. And the ultimate of those is Zelda's been inventing some potion, and it turns out that it cleans everything. So Hilda and Salem, and then Zelda joins in, are selling it and making absolutely shed loads of money, and then in the last 3 minutes of the episode they find out it gives you this green rash, and they have to recall it all and give back all the money. And that might even be the same episode where Sabrina casts a spell to keep Libby away 5 paces, and then the quizmaster turns up, says you can't do that, now you have to stay within 5 paces of Libby. Sabrina doesn't, and she turns into a jigsaw puzzle. I mean, how arbitrary is that? Which is a shame, because it's one of those ones where they try and have a bit more depth to Libby. She has to go around looking for the missing pieces of the puzzle, and she finds out that she's getting math tuition and she loves her grandma.
Yes, that could have been a springboard for a lot of Libby development. I remember watching that one in a Sabrina marathon in the early part of this century and thinking, interesting ideas there. I think it's actually wrong that they get rid of Libby for season 4 after all. And ever since then, I have grown more and more sure that that is the case.
And I'm sure we didn't notice at the time what a lazily written episode that was. So then season 4 gets rid of Valerie and Libby. It keeps Mrs. Quick, Mr. Kraft, and Harvey. And by the way, Gordy, who you mentioned earlier, has been recurring through all these 4 seasons as one of Sabrina's contemporaries. And he's very good too.
I think season 4 may be the only season I actually sat and watched all the way through on CITV, and it's not the best one to do it with. But I remember thinking, oh, they've squeezed an extra year out of high school. They shouldn't really have done that. It makes no sense, and they've done all they can with high school anyway, and they've got rid of Libby and not developed her. It's going to be a mistake, I feel. And I also thought, oh, they've made the opening music sequence stupid now. Bubbles and some vocal nonsense about secrets. I like the old upbeat opening with Sabrina hopefully saying something amusing at the end in a costume. Much better.
I think probably part of that was to do with that they've run out of things for her to say. She's, if you've seen it, you'll know this, standing there, changing her clothes by magic, and then the last outfit is a surprise, and she says some amusing line to go with it. Like, for instance, I can you? When she's in a can outfit. And, well, a traditional witch's outfit, of course, and she goes, this is so not me. But yes, it's got these bubbles, and you can see the actors, and it goes Melissa Joan Hart, Caroline Rhea, Beth Broderick, Nate Richard, Nick Bakay as Salem the Cat, and it's the one time you can actually see him right there and he's a cat, which is a bit weird, and Martin Mull as Willard Craft. And then the replacements, Valerie and Libby, along with a new character, I'll tell you about, they're also starring in the beginning if they're in it. So essentially, Valerie's replaced with Dreamer with an A, who is an apprentice witch and Sabrina's sort of peer mentoring her. And she goes to school in the mortal realm and has lived in the other realm all her life, and she's a bit clumsy and she uses her magic when she shouldn't, and she's played by China Jesusita Shavers. So she hasn't got the nicest name in the world, but actually there's really nothing wrong with her performance. She's quite good, and I think it is not a bad idea to have a witch contemporary with Sabrina, and she can talk to someone else about witch stuff, and Salem can talk to someone else at all. So I think that actually works quite well.
A more obvious attempt at ethnic diversity in the cast, of course, than Valerie had been.
And, well, essentially Libby's replacement is also not white. His name is John Huertas. And once I looked him up on the Internet Movie Database or Wikipedia or something, and I swear it said he was about 32 when he was playing this high school senior. And I wanted to check that so I could tell you that it's definitely true, and I couldn't find his date of birth anywhere. So maybe I dreamt that, maybe I really found that out. And unlike Dreamer, the premise of his character is completely ridiculous. He has a witch hunter gene, and he takes an instinctive dislike to Sabrina, and to a lesser extent Dreamer, because they don't interact that much. And if he figures it out and says the word, you're a witch, she turns into a mouse. Which is not the worst idea ever, but it's not that great. And what else? He's Harvey's friend, and there is an episode where he turns Dreamer into a mouse. It's one of those ones where Sabrina has side effects of things that are happening anyway. She's excited about some sort of school trip, so she's got spring fever, so she can't focus. So after he's turned Dreamer into a mouse, she has to do surgery on him to remove his witch hunter gene, which if she does it within a certain time frame will change Dreamer back into a person. And she has to overcome her spring fever in order to do so, if that makes any sense.
Yes, I'm not surprised I'd stopped engaging with it at all by that stage.
But the interesting thing is that Melissa Joan Hart can actually make something of it, because she's standing there with these like scrubs on and stuff and these electrodes. She's trying to do this surgery in this particular situation, of course. But the way that she's like, right, I'm going to do it now, and then she starts like giggling, getting distracted. She does that really well, and it actually made me laugh.
Rather like years later, Melissa and Joey, which we've mentioned before, as a whole. When you'd sit and watch it, I would say, well, it's terribly written, it's not funny, but the cast, principally Melissa Joan Hart and her interactions with her on-screen niece and nephew, make it work for me, because I believe in the relationship. So I think Melissa can bring a lot to life that really doesn't deserve to be brought to life so well.
Yes, but I'll tell you another annoying thing about that episode. He didn't even figure out that Dreamer was a witch. He just saw her and was like, oh, I didn't think that water fountain was there a second ago, but perhaps it was. And then he says, I swear, Dreamer, sometimes I think you're a witch. And then he just walks off like he hasn't even said it. And that's enough to turn her into a mouse. I was not satisfied with that. He should figure it out and say, you're a witch, like they were threatening for the whole series. Oh, by the way, if you really want to know, Sabrina's 17 for 2 years, and then she's 18 for 2 years. So this extra year of high school, she's 18. She's been 17 for season 2 and season 3. And she's also 18 for her first year of college, so there you go. But what else happens in season 4? What else happens in season 4 is that Sabrina gets a job in the coffee house. And who runs the coffee house? Bloody Josh runs the coffee house. He's a university college student, but he's the manager and you never see the owner. Hilda is not the owner yet because she has bought the clock shop, which is something else I better tell you about. First, because it's quite quick, she and Zelda and sometimes Salem hang around in this clock shop, and sometimes a character comes out of the magic clock to move the plot along, and that's pretty much it.
I always remembered that as happening later in season 4 because it's so stupid, but no, there it is.
Yes, one of the unwise changes, which is fundamentally flawed, whereas Sabrina working in the coffee house there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that they got a crap actor to play Josh. I mean, why would you do that? I suppose in season 4 he doesn't actually have to do that much. So they didn't notice he was no good. It's once he becomes main rather than recurring cast that you really start to see what's wrong with him.
I suppose you can tell from that as well as squeezing an extra year out of high school, they are thinking about planning for the future of the show and wanting it to have a future and making a kind of transition series, like when they first decided to introduce on New Year's 7 in the Grange Hill. And perhaps they were thinking the clock shop would be a long-term thing as well, but thank goodness it wasn't.
Yes, it is quite understandable that they got more out of the coffee house than the clock shop. When Sabrina's heart turns into Valentine's candy, it's because Josh and Harvey are in love with her. There's this whole thing where Harvey sees Sabrina getting kissed by Josh when she was supposed to be at his football game. And she didn't use a double, so he went to her house to see what was going on and found her with Josh, and then they're split up for a few episodes, and then they get back together, thank God. So that's what they're doing with Josh anyway, he's over Sabrina. And he doesn't really have to do anything, but you can already see the difference between his performance and Nate Richards' performance. I.e. Nate Richards is really, really good and engaging, and David Lasher's is very flat. And he's the one who gets to be also starring along with China and John. I like to say what Amanda does in each series. In season 4, she comes out of the linen closet, and they're all like, oh no, Amanda, she's going to cause havoc, which she was doing in The Wonder of the Plumber. And she's all like, oh no, I'm not a spoiled brat anymore, I'm a teenage witch just like you. So she's grown up a bit, but then you find out she still is kind of bratty, and she is getting a crush on Harvey, and she takes him up to Cloud 9, I think. At some point there's a Cloud 10, but I think she only takes him to Cloud 9. Yes, and he's saying, I'm on Cloud 9 with you, Amanda, and that kind of thing. And Sabrina comes to find them, and Amanda goes, hey, you get off of my cloud. It's quite funny. And I think that is quite good use of Amanda. She's still the same character, but she's starting to grow up. And that's pretty much it for season 4, except it possibly wasn't the best move keeping Mr. Kraft because they really run out of ideas for him. The writer, who I remember making the most of the cast, including Brad, is Nick Bakay, who writes some episodes and some good episodes. He wrote the one in season 2, by the way, where Sabrina turns herself into a boy, and it makes fun of sort of teenage boy stereotypes, which is very funny. Like, she's in school and she walks off down the corridor, and then she jumps up and hits this lintel and takes off a guy's hat for no reason. Very good. And Nick Bakay also writes a season 4 episode with the childhood dream Super Soaker. So Harvey ends up being this superhero, Mighty Teen, and then after he's been doing it for a bit, they're at school and he's wearing these glasses and insisting that he's never met Mighty Teen, and then something's going on and he goes into this classroom and comes out a second later as Mighty Teen doing this Superman takeoff, and he's very, very good at that, as you can imagine. And Mr. Kraft's childhood dream is to build an aeroplane and fly across the Atlantic with it or something. So that's going on in the episode, and it really is the best use of Mr. Kraft in the series. And goodness knows if they were considering keeping him on, but after that, obviously, that would have been a silly thing to do. And that really is it for season 4. Mind you, they do leave us with a cliffhanger. Harvey finally figuring out that Sabrina is a witch for an arbitrary reason to do with him reaching his maximum spell quota or something, which is obviously nonsense. And then you think, oh, Harvey's realised she's a witch, what's going to happen next? So you come back to season 5, and Harvey's gone. And they're saying, oh yes, Harvey broke up with Sabrina after he found out she was a witch. And you sort of think, oh. And of course, Mr. Kraft is gone, Dream is gone, Brad's gone, Sabrina's off to college, where we get introduced to a new cast, and we have a new opening title sequence as well, which is Sabrina kind of like walking and dancing around Boston. And as someone on the YouTube video comment section was pointing out, if you want to find all the Sabrina openings, they're all there. What's wrong with that sequence is that it's got nothing to do with being a witch and having magic, which the other ones have. Which tells you something really about the direction the show's taking. It does become a lot less about magic and being a witch. Cast goes Melissa Joan Hart, Caroline Rhea, Beth Broderick, and Nick Bakay as the voice of Salem, and Soleil Moon Frye as Roxy, which is quite an honour. And she is one of Sabrina's college roommates, along with Elisa Donovan as Morgan, and Trevor Lissauer as Miles, who get to be also starring, if they're in it, as does David Lasher as Josh. And then throughout season 5, they're doing college stuff, occasionally a little bit of magic, and Josh and Sabrina are under the impression that they're doing a gripping, intriguing will they, won't they, but they're really not. It's just annoying. Like, Sabrina's all like, oh no, I don't want to get into a relationship so soon after Harvey, and then, oh yes I do, oh but Josh is with Morgan now, oh look, they've split up, but Sabrina's got this annoying boyfriend called Kevin. It's very much the same sort of thing as you get in other TV programs and not done particularly well. So that's annoying.
I don't see the point of taking it in that direction, having less focus on the magic, the USP. And I always used to think they probably should have retitled it Sabrina, as she's obviously no longer teenage and they don't care about her being a witch. And you were telling me you thought perhaps they did because it moved to a new network in season 5.
I think I read that in the US it was called Sabrina, but we kept Teenage Witch over here. Maybe because it didn't move to a new network, it was still CITV, still the same series, and they just wanted us to get what was going on, that it was supposed to be the same thing. Having said all that, season 5 has its moments. In season 6, they really start running out of ideas what to do with Hilda and Zelda, but in season 5, when I watched it recently, I remember thinking, well, this isn't bad use of them, but what they do, of course, is plonk them in Sabrina's regular locations now that she's not living at home anymore. Hilda sells the clock shop or has had to give up the clock shop because it wasn't making money and buys the coffee house. And Zelda teaches at Sabrina's college, so they're around. Let's talk a little bit about the new characters. Morgan is a bit of a Libby in that she's sort of shallow and silly, but she's more of a protagonist. And she does things like boss everybody around and take Sabrina to her house for Christmas and have issues with her family, which is the most that she gets to do, and be this obstacle for Sabrina and Josh, and keep annoying Josh, and eventually that's why he gets rid of her, and that kind of thing. And at that point, I think it seems that Trevor Lissauer as Miles has got a bit more depth. He's a sort of nerdy man character, and as I was telling you recently, they never work, do they? They get these like nerdy man characters who they think are funny, and you watch them and you think this is so unfunny.
That's right, we mentioned that very recently.
But that aspect of his character, I think Trevor Lissauer makes the most of. But it's not what I like about him. What I like about him are his hidden depths. There are 2 episodes that really focus on him. One where he's getting taken in by this cult leader who claims to be a witch but actually isn't one, and he's conning these people. And the other one is where Miles sees what is actually Hilda with this boyfriend that she's got in his flying car, and he's into like space and aliens and stuff, so he thinks it's a spaceship, and he tells everyone that he's seen this spaceship, and everyone starts saying that he's crazy, and he's trying to do something with it in his college class, and then it completely goes wrong, so he decides that he'd better not try and be a paranormal investigator anymore and go into his parents' accountancy business. Prior to this, he has had the balls and the gumption to do what he wants to do instead of just being an accountant like his parents. And then this experience changes his mind, and Sabrina knows that he really did see a flying car and is trying to help him out and stop him from being an accountant. And that's quite a good episode. And then there's Roxy, who is sort of aggressive, acerbic kind of rock chick thing, and I was saying to you, I think these new characters are comedy characters, archetypes, rather than, which they mostly are, fully fleshed out individuals like in the earlier series. So you can see there are some problems with the direction that it's taking. All the same, the cast is very good, except for David Lasher, and they make the most of it, and I do quite enjoy season 5. Despite what I've been saying. And what I do like is that even though they got rid of the set, which is the upstairs, the linen closet and Sabrina's bedroom, she does actually bother going to the house and walking upstairs if she wants to go to the other realm. Whereas in season 6, which is where it really starts to take a bit of a nosedive, she starts zapping herself into the other realm, which she never used to be able to do, so that's very annoying. Season 6 has identical main cast, except that with also starring, sometimes you get Nate Richard. He had 3 appearances in season 5, one of which was extremely brief, where Hilda accidentally zaps him into the coffee house. And I thought Melissa did a very good reaction to suddenly, unexpectedly seeing her ex-boyfriend after some time, after she's been through so much with him. I thought that was very good. And on those 3 occasions, he was special guest star Nate Richard as Harvey, having been in the main cast previously, and then season 6, he gets to be in, also starring, along with David Lasher, Trevor Lissauer, Elise Donovan. So he's there, which is good, but the problem is, what do they do with him? Not very much is the answer, and they put him in a relationship with Morgan, which seems to be what they do with men that they can't really think what to do with, and they don't want to get them with Sabrina yet.
I always thought they should have Harvey and Salem do more together, now that Harvey's in on everything.
I do like that aspect that Harvey knows what's going on, she can talk to him about it, but yes, it takes till 3/4 of the way through the season, I think, for him and Salem to even talk to each other, which is a shame. What else is wrong with season 6? They really are running out of ideas for Hilda and Zelda, so they do stupid things like Other Realms Scare Duty. Those depths that Miles has that I was talking about are completely gone, and they just make him do things like take a ballet class and wear leg warmers, go around with a life-size cardboard cutout of the woman who starred in Swamp Thing, and that sort of thing, which is a terrible decision. Another thing that I don't like is that Sabrina and Josh are an item. They have no chemistry, he's terrible at acting, and he's a complete arse to her a lot of the time as well. If something's been going on because of her magic, and she has to apologise and explain, with lies, of course, apologise anyway to Josh, he always is douchey about it and makes her do it more than once, which Harvey never used to do. And there's a real problem of showing David Lasher up when Nate Richert is there. Do you remember Morgan's fashion show?
No, I really don't remember anything specific from these last ones.
Morgan's fashion show was the bit that made you say about David Lasher, he can't pull anything off. Her models have dropped out. She's doing this fashion show at college. Her models have dropped out. So Sabrina, Roxy, Josh, Harvey, and Miles have to be the models, and they're crap at it. And all of them can be crap models and make it funny, except David Lasher. And it really stands out then how crap he is. A couple of things I do like about season 6. One is the Halloween episode. They're always quite keen on their Halloween episode, and Halloween is a huge deal to witches. But after season 1, seasons 2, 3, 4, and 5, the Halloween episode is basically the same, where there's like a party or something and monsters come and attack them. Whereas in season 6, they go on this other realm murder mystery train, and Josh dies, which is brilliant because it means he's not in it. I mean, what a clever idea. They must have realised that the others were all better than him. So they were all playing these film noir characters, and he was dead. And I enjoyed that because Josh was dead in it, and it was also something a bit different for Halloween. But that is one of the examples of where Hilda and Zelda don't really have any real part in the episode, and they start getting off with all the men. They turn into a right pair of slappers, to be honest. There's always some man that they're after or with, which really goes to show that they've run out of ideas for them. Another thing that's quite good about season 6 is the newspaper. Before season 5, college, Sabrina never really had plans for the future, you know, what to do for a career. And then at college she decided that she wanted to be a journalist, which was always Clarissa's big dream, wasn't it?
Yes, there was talk of a spin-off or carry-on of Clarissa being a journalist in New York. They seem to have picked up where they left off and given it to Sabrina in Boston.
Yes, and the editor at the newspaper is Norm from Cheers, and his name in Sabrina is Mike. And he's very good. And he's sort of like mentoring Sabrina. The problem is that Josh is there working as a photographer, so that spoils it a bit. Another thing that's annoying is Sabrina's mother comes along and turns into a ball of wax because suddenly Sabrina's not ever allowed to see her, not just those 2 years.
Inconsistency, and no one would ever stand for that. They'd rather forfeit their magic. IRL.
Yes, absolutely crazy. And actually, there's a season 2 episode with the Quizmaster where he says, oh, you can choose to ever see your mom again or keep your magic. And, you know, she ums and ahs for a bit, but she says, I can't not ever see my mum again, take my magic. And it turns out it's a test. So she gets her magic back and can't see her mum for another year or so. But then, yeah, it's forever and makes absolutely no sense, ridiculous. So that's season 6. Season 7 I enjoy more than season 6. It's a funny one because after squeezing out an extra year of high school and then saying, oh yeah, Sabrina's going to be in college for a bit, they decide there's nothing more to do with college. So she's been 16 for a year, 17 for 2 years, 18 for 2 years, probably 19, and then she's suddenly grown up, left college. And she gets a job at a music magazine. Hilda, they fairly organically, as in, you know, they wrote it in, left at the end of season 6 by marrying the train driver from that Halloween episode I was talking about. Zelda, Beth Broderick, I suspect, was hoping to stay on because it seemed like she would at the end of the season. And then she wasn't there anymore. I think probably they didn't want her without Hilda. They couldn't have meant to do with her. They would have liked her to be there at the beginning and say, well, I'm going to leave you to it now, Sabrina. But she couldn't or wouldn't, so she had to be a child in exchange for fixing Sabrina after she fell to pieces after being separated from her soulmate, which was a season 6 cliffhanger. Now, the possibilities for her soulmate were Harvey, Josh, and a guy who was delivering the wedding cake. As a sort of, well, maybe it's not either of them. Maybe she hasn't met her soulmate sort of thing, which is fine. But then David Lasher leaves, which is partly, thank God for that, but partly, well, now you've stopped it from making any sense, you complete idiot. Because who's left to be Sabrina's soulmate? Just Harvey, which is the right thing, but they should have kept us guessing for a bit. I'll get onto that more in a bit, but the opening titles now, it goes, starring Melissa Joan Hart, Elisa Donovan, Nick Bakay as the voice of Salem, and Soleil Moon Frye as Roxy. And then Nate Richard, who was main cast, then special guest star, then also starring with people who were main cast, suddenly is also starring with the secondary cast, while Elisa Donovan gets promoted to opening titles. Now, is that fair? I don't think so. And anyway, these secondary cast are her boss and co-workers in this magazine. I can't remember the names of the actors. Her boss is Annie, her co-workers are Leonard, who's the mild, nerdy man sort of character, James, and Cole. And they just work on the magazine with her, and there's not a lot to say about them. And then when they find out they're going to get cancelled, they decide they don't want the magazine anymore. They don't want the sets, they don't want the cast. So she just quits her job, which doesn't make any sense at all that she would just do that, especially as she went through so much trouble to get it at the start of the season. They should have just said that she still worked there, but it was all off screen. But then what they're doing with the end of the season is having Sabrina meet and get engaged to, in the space of about 7 episodes, this character called Aaron. And I noticed the last time I was watching it that I thought he looked slightly like the husband in Bewitched, who's called Darren. And that rhymes, so I thought maybe that was a bit of homage. And then there's all this, oh, is he my soulmate? Maybe it's Harvey, maybe it's not. No, I want to marry Aaron. No, I don't. And he wasn't there when she fell to pieces. It was supposed to be Josh, you would suspect, and I think I have read this and had it confirmed. They wanted to do that engagement storyline with Josh, and he wasn't there. I mean, what an idiot. But there were 2 things that they could have done to sort that out to an extent. They could have recast Josh. I guess they didn't want to do that, like they don't want to recast Vesta, they would never want to recast Harvey or the aunts or anyone like that. I guess he's one of those characters that they just didn't want to do it with. But they could have, for the sake of making sense, and because David Lasher's such crap, I'm sure no one would have cared. And then, okay, not had him in it for a bit. He went to Prague to be a photographer in Prague. So have him in Prague for most of the season. Then bring in some actor, and Sabrina could have gone, Josh! Like when Robbie Benson's been her father, and then in season 4 she opens up her birthday present, and a guy jumps out, and it's not Robbie Benson. She goes, Dad! We go, oh, alright if you say so. Could have done the exact same thing with Josh! And then, oh, I love you, Sabrina, let's get engaged, let's get married, and then done everything the same. That would have been okay. Or, if they really didn't want to recast Josh that badly, which obviously they didn't, they could have done it with the guy who delivered the cake. That would have made a lot more sense if he was on the list of possible soulmates. If they didn't want him to be a cake delivery guy all the time, if they wanted him to be managing this band, he could have just, which is what Aaron does, he could have just been delivering wedding cakes on the side while he finished college or whatever. That would have been okay, and they really could have done it exactly the same, and they could have done the whole, does she really know him well enough, making a Alice in Wonderland watch to tell you what he's really like, what makes him tick, that's what it was. Him being a temporary exhibit in her heart, that kind of thing. And they could have said that his name was Aaron. They could have recast him if the guy who delivered the cake didn't want to do it, and nobody would have even noticed. So, as you can tell, I'm quite cross about that. But luckily, it turns out Harvey's her soulmate, and they ride off together on his motorbike after she runs out on her wedding to Aaron. So that's about it for season 7, but I've been forgetting Amanda, haven't I? In season 5, it's another backdoor pilot where she goes to this school for kind of delinquent witches, and they have a PE teacher sort of character who's a talking dog, which doesn't make any sense because he's always been a dog, but a talking dog. And that's completely inconsistent with talking animals who have all been punished by being turned into witch familiars. And the guy running it had some kind of history with Zelda that they were obviously planning on revisiting if they got picked up, and he was never allowed to see Zelda, only Hilda, so that they wouldn't recognise each other. It's pretty obvious what's going on there. And the woman who was running it with him was Carol from Friends, so that was slightly interesting. And yeah, Amanda got into the school and she was going to go to it, and she started having a love interest and all sorts of things that never got continued because it wasn't picked up. Season 6, she turns up aged 15, not 17 when a witch starts studying for her witch's license, and so she needs help with something to get her witch's license. And she's just doing a subplot with Hilda and Zelda. And then season 7, she's aged more like 16 or maybe 17 or 18 if Sabrina's supposed to be a couple of years older. And she's still got some sass and that kind of thing, and will get up in your face if you pay her off, but she's more of a friend to Sabrina and comes to visit her and gives her a hug and that kind of thing.
The journey they really should have taken Libby on, I think. And Emily Hart missed out on these backdoor pilot pickups, but she did end up voicing the character Sabrina in another version of animated Sabrina in the 90s, with Nick Bakay as Salem as well. So she certainly got plenty of work off Sabrina, Emily Hart.
Yes, her second appearance in season 7, long time ago I said she had to, is that she's a bridesmaid at this wedding that doesn't finish. And I do quite like how Aaron's mother makes some snide remark about her not looking that nice in the bridesmaid's dress, and she goes, "Hey, I have melted people for less than that," which I thought was a pretty good reaction. And actually she's the one who goes and gets Harvey on his motorbike. Quite funny. He's driving along on his motorbike and she just appears on the back and he goes, "Ah!" and crashes the motorbike. Very good. And she sorts the whole thing out and goes and finds his soul stone, which proves that they're soulmates. But obviously she's not Aaron's soulmate because he wasn't there when that whole thing happened. But anyway, I did watch a bit of those 90s cartoons on YouTube, and I found those quite boring actually, but I think there wasn't anything really wrong with them. I might have found them more engaging when I was young. Melissa Joan Hart's in that too, of course, as the voice of Hilda and Zelda, and I can't praise her enough. I've said how good she is. I think, unlike Mel Blanc though, she doesn't have thousands of voices, so Hilda's voice ends up sounding a bit weird when she's trying to make it different from Zelda's. Another thing which I did briefly check out, the most recent incarnation of Sabrina, is a CG thing where Salem has a sort of Hispanic sounding accent like cats always do ever since Shrek 2. And there's some kind of recurring antagonist called Enchantra, and I'm not sure what she's trying to do, and she has tenderly hands coming through the mirror and spies on Sabrina, I don't even know. Harvey's there looking like how a hunk looks nowadays, not the kind of thing that we used to like in the 90s.
An oily weed.
Yes, that sort of thing. He has some kind of friend. Sabrina's friend is after, I think, and she's voiced by Cree Summer and has a name that I don't know what it is, and she's never been in any other incarnation. Or am I getting confused? Is Cree Summer her friend in the Emily Hart one? But anyway, she has totally different Jenny, Marnie, Valerie, Roxy kind of character in all these things. And I just pretty much wanted to be sick watching that CG one. It was a load of absolute rubbish. particularly Harvey. There's a lot wrong with Harvey in the TV movie. The Hanna-Barbera one, he has such a stupid voice, and he says things like, "Oh, gee, Sabrina, that sure sounds groovy." And that CG one I just mentioned. I think there's nothing really wrong with him in the Emily Hart one, but you can't really do Harvey without Nate Richard, and once you've found him, you should never, never let him go. And that's about everything, I think.
Do join us again on the final Sunday in August for a new podcast on Brave Star.
Yes, I will be much less vocal for that one anyway, but I'll have a few things to say. And until then, good night out there.
Whatever you are.